Okay, we will now talk some military stuff. You know, in the army we can't live without slides, right? So now we will switch from listening to visual, right? Pavel, you talked about totally different sphere, but I already captured some of common denominators here. And I think the one which is the most illustrative is that when I have landed in Afghanistan for the first time, I also had a great difficulty to figure out who is my client. So that's, I think, something common with stock exchange and the army. Okay, let me lead you in very quickly. You know, the officers in the army, we are corporate animals, right? The military is a big corporation with the structure, with the hierarchy. We are corporate animals, right? But it is a very specific type of corporation. Besides the fact that we don't wear ties and we sometimes sleep at work, we are surrounded by, let's say, a very risky and demanding environment. And as a result of that, we, the officers, the managers, we operate in that kind of the job which is physically, psychologically, and intellectually quite demanding. So I will now try to put that leadership in the context of the military, right? Just like Professor Zakharov mentioned, we have to put the leadership in the context. So I'll try to put the leadership in the military context. Okay, first, this is something we will not talk about, right? The military service in general. War stories, maybe some, all right? And politics, that's already been covered, so we're not going to talk about that. This is what we are going to talk about. First of all, I would like to bring you that context, that military context of the leadership, for you to realize what we talk about. Then I will shortly describe to you 10 rules of effective leadership in that particular context. And these rules, they come from my experience. And then maybe we will have some discussion. Now, when we speak about the experience on which I am basing, right? Throughout my corporate life in the military, I have accumulated 25 years of experience. Throughout these 25 years, I've been handling a different set of command and staff positions in numerous organizations, ranging from infantry, special forces. You know, currently I am chief of staff of the special forces, which is that staff is an organization of about 200 people. I've been through combat deployments, Afghanistan, Iraq, so I will also have the mandate to talk to you about leadership in some extreme situations, right? This presentation, the intent of it is not for me to say that I know how to perfectly run organizations. This is just about the experience which I would like to share with you, right? Keep in mind that every particular situation may require something different. Okay, so let's talk a bit about that context, right? The leadership. We say in the army, the leadership is about influencing people to do something, right? When we speak about the influence on the people, we can talk about the management and the regular corporations. We can also talk about command function in the military, right? By a command, we understand a specific type of the management. It's a specific type of the management because it is executed in a specific environment, okay? People are looking at these slides like this is the wrong slide, no? Okay, so now, I am telling you that influencing people in civilian corporate life it looks the same as in the military, but it's not really the same, and it depends on the context, okay? So I'm trying to bring an illustrative example to show to you how some of the activities may differ, even though they look the same in the civilian life and the military life. So, one of such examples are parachuting. Any paratroopers here? Anybody? Anybody here? All right. Yeah. All right. Good. So parachuting, great fun, right? In the civilian life, we love it. It's great fun. Okay. When we put it in the military context, it's less great fun, right? but when we go even more extreme into the military context, it can be much less fun, right? So this is also how that context influences the leadership, okay? The same thing, but in the military context, seem a little bit different, right? Okay, so let's now come back to our topic, the military environment of leadership. Okay, some of the highlights. First of all, we have a strong organizational culture in the military. It's clear, it's, let's say, well-framed, it's well built in, right? It's the consolidated community. The officers, we create some type of the caste, right? We say we are very close together, okay? We have a strong bond to the organization's objectives, okay? We very often bring this example of serve versus work, right? We say we do not work at the army, we serve, right? This is the service, right? So we identify ourselves with the organization. Okay, the risk. Our leadership's role is executed in a high risk. That risk sometimes is life-threatening, okay? It doesn't have to be necessarily a combat deployment. It can be a training, which is also sometimes risky. The physical dimension. We as leaders in the military sometimes are also put in extreme physical situations, right? Training and combat requires, sometimes brings people to their physical limits, okay? Lack of alternatives. You know, in combat you cannot quit, right? There is no way out, okay? You cannot say, boss, I quit, right? You there. There's no way to, there's no alternative, basically, okay? So these are just a couple of specifics describing the leadership in the military context. Let's take a look on the historical perspective, okay? And now I will come back to one of my favorite guys, Moltke, 19th century, okay? And this is what he says. We have to earn the trust, okay? We earn the trust by personal conduct. The personal conduct has to be executed with calm and assurance, okay? So when we speak about the leadership in the military organization, we talk about trust, we talk about inspiration to the people we lead. That's the word which has been used by Pavel many times during his speech. And I think in the center of it is the example. It's the personal example of the leader who is responsible to execute these functions. Okay? Now, when you take a look on the German school of thought of the leadership, it might be not very popular what I'm going to say now, but the German army before the World War II, even though we say their political goals were bad, their organization was pretty good, right? And they have actually produced that manual which is called the Truppenführung. And the Truppenführung became a basic manual for the US Army after World War II to produce their books about the leadership. And the Truppenführung says that the leaders, they must lead with their troops, they have to participate in their dangers, their wants, their joys, their sorrows, right? So basically, once again, that effective leadership, which is gained by the trust and inspiration, is executed most of all by personal example when we speak about leadership in the military context. Okay, now let's try to build that bridge between the historical perspective, the theoretical outlook, and my experience, okay? I have developed 10 rules for effective leadership. They are built basing on the context of my personal military experience. I'm not saying they're perfect, okay, but you can use it if you want, right? Okay, what is this guy going to talk about, right? Take it easy, we'll now go step by step. All right, so first of all, rule number 1, you have to master your adaptation skills. Okay, in the military, when we proceed with our career, as officers, almost every time we hit some other organizations, okay? Almost every time we come to the new organization, right? If it is a platoon, or a company, or a battalion, or some kind of a staff, the career means to us new organization, right? So I am new in the organization, what am I supposed to do? You know, we, the corporate animals, we are the predators, right? And as a predators, we are put in the situations where we have to fight, struggle for existence in the new environment almost every couple of years. So first of all, we say do not fight the system until you fully understand it, okay? People have this tendency to enforce their own visions, even though they do not really understand the situation they are put into, okay? So you have to give yourself a time to understand the organization first before you start to change it. When we speak about that, it's also very useful to identify yourself with your predecessor. Okay? You have to understand that you come to a new organization. That organization already had some kind of leader, okay, and might not be good to criticize this guy from the first day you take over command. All right? Let the others help you. It is not a sin to ask questions. Okay? I personally had a habit of asking people to bring me no more than 3 documents which they think are the most important for their particular jobs, right? That kind of let me understand what they actually can do for me. Okay? So, adaptive skills. Now, when we speak about the adaptation, it is not only about, let's say, being new at your position. Because once you get comfortable in your skipper's chair, then you figure out that you have a lot of variables around you which you cannot control. Okay? In other words, every day at your job brings you to something new. And I remember these times when I was sitting with my chief of staff while being deployed in Afghanistan, and every day in the morning we were asking ourselves a question. I just wonder what this day is going to bring to us, okay? Because every day was new, all right? So, when you are in such a situation, you have to be flexible with your planning, okay? That means that you have to focus on the effect you want to achieve, not necessarily on the way you want to do that, okay? In the military, we call it a mission-type planning, okay? So it is, let's say, flexible, it is effect-focused, okay? It is, let's say, a change-prone type of planning. Now, when you look at your subordinates, you also have to make sure that they will accept changes, okay? You have to make sure that they understand that they will have to change sometimes their conduct, okay? And this might not be too comfortable for them. Micromanagement, something what kills the organizations, and this is also a part of flexible, the lack of it is a part of the flexible planning. Okay, we say feel good in the chaos, because life in military, especially while being deployed, is very chaotic. But feeling good in the chaos does not mean being chaotic, okay? So when you want to navigate in these uncharted waters of uncertainty of the new day, you have to be sure that you have a correct judgment. Okay? I think that word is especially important, the judgment. Okay? Judgment brings you to a desired end state when you navigate through the world of the uncertainty. So how do you build that judgment? Okay? The ability to judge situation quickly and correctly. I think there are 2 factors which build the ability to judge. Number 1 is knowledge. So you have to be professional, just like Pavel mentioned, you have to have this base of your professional knowledge. Number 2 is experience. Okay? These 2 will provide you with the judgment. Okay, so we maneuver through uncertainties. We have mentioned that we need that knowledge, okay? And I used to say that the officer The officer is like a product of the Microsoft. We have an inborn skill of self-update. Okay? You know, the world progresses very fast. And sometimes what you learn in the school, in your study, might not be necessarily up to date 1 year after you graduate. Okay? So in order to be an effective leader, in order to have the ability to judge situations correctly and quickly, you need that knowledge, but you have to update your knowledge. Okay? You have to have this inborn feature of self-update. All right. Care about your image is the next rule of effective leadership. You know, people are very careful observers. All right. Especially when you come to a new organization, you may be sure that throughout the first few weeks of you acting as the chief, you will have all eyes on you. Okay? People like to observe new things. People like to observe things they can chat about. Okay? So you are such a thing. Okay? So now, people are careful observers. It provides for a leader a very stressful environment because, once again, all eyes on you. But a skillful leader can also exploit it. So, as we say in the military, it's first impression. First impression is something you can never do for the second time. Okay? It's an obvious thing. You really have to be prepared for every single day of the first week of being a leader. Okay? You have to think over what you're going to say. You have to think at what time, in which place you are going to meet your subordinates. Okay? Everything has to be very well thought over, and this will pay back. Okay. Rule number 3: define a clear standard. You know, it may seem strange, but I think that people prefer high and clearly defined standards rather than blurry and known standards. Okay? People feel comfortable when you live in clearly defined world. Okay? People feel comfortable when they know how to deserve your reward, how to deserve your respect, but people also have to be sure about how they can deserve your anger. Okay? So you have to clearly define the standard. You define these standards for them and for yourself as well. So, when we speak about the positive behavior in your organization, something you have to create. Okay, here is what I think. You know, I have the experience of leading the organizations. The biggest one which I have led was infantry battalion, 800 men, professional soldiers. This organization had 5 levels of command. All right. So I was, from the top of it, I was able to know, say, personally, maybe 2 levels down, all right? And I didn't know the rest of the guys, okay? But I had to inspire them to some extent. So now, how do you operate in the multi-level organization? So when you speak about your immediate subordinates, okay? It's 1 level down, 2 level down. So you have to focus on supervision, okay, on the exercise of command or exercise of management. Now, when you speak about the whole organization, about all 800, 1,000, 2,000 men and women, then you speak about the inspiration. You have to inspire your soldiers, all right, or your subordinates. And I will just bring you one example, a little war story, right? When we were deployed to Afghanistan in 2007, I had my soldiers deployed in a variety of bases, some of them very small ones. Okay? There was one base located in the mountains with 30 men. Very small base. They were attacked very often. They were attacked so often that they were almost afraid of going out of the base. Right? They were clearly overrun. But At some point, I thought they only thought they were overrun by the enemy, okay? So I thought maybe we should come to this base with bigger force at some point and just run a few patrols in the mountains to show to these guys that they can actually go anywhere they want without being harmed by the enemy. And we did so, okay? So by this particular operation, we showed to the enemy that we controlled the area. But I think the most important for me as a leader was to show to this man in this particular base that they control the situation. I inspired them by this action to actually conduct operations outside of the base. Positive behavior. There are some things which can be found inside you as a leader, some things which have to, let's say, be reflected outside of you as a leader. So first of all, your own high standard, okay? You set up the rules for your organization. The rules are the same for everybody. And you as a leader are the only man or the only woman in the organization for whom the rule is not the same. The rule is higher for you as for the leader. Your image, something we already talked about. Outside of you, you pay respect to the people, you never disrespect the people. You know, sometimes you really think they are stupid. Sometimes you think so. People do stupid things. But even if you think so, you can't disrespect them. And the consequence, okay? Once you lay down the rules, then you have to stick to the rules, all right? Okay, be with them, but not necessarily be one of them. There are some leaders who want to be cool, who want to show that, you know, they will be the best in the team. This is not necessarily something I think we should all follow. You have to show your subordinate that you are the best in management. You're not necessarily the best in, let's say, computer work they do in the corporate life. Okay, let's talk about these crazy guys. You know, these small words here, my experience is that if you land in a new organization, 25% of the times you are satisfied with what you see. Speaking about the manpower, right? 25% of the time you are concerned with what you see. 25% you were afraid, and the other 25 you were totally depressed with what you see, right? So there is only 25% of the time in which you are satisfied. So you will almost always be satisfied with what you find in the new organization. And let me now bring you the story. At some point of my career, I had a very wise commanding officer. He then became a chief of general staff of the Polish army. At one point, I had visited him. I was assigned a company command, and we had a little speech over the coffee. And I started to complain to him as a young officer. I started to complain about soldiers which are in the company, the officers not being trained enough, you know, blah, blah, blah. And he told me, listen, don't complain about your men. You know, you have to work with the tools which you have. So it is not a big deal to work with a perfect team. The big deal is to make a good team or make a good enough team with people which you have. Okay? So this is, I think, the truth about good leadership. That you are not necessarily, you do not necessarily have the best team, but you have to have the ability to make a good team out of the people which you basically have in your organization. Okay, so sometimes when you're depressed, you see your team of the guys, you think, oh my God, I have to cross the ocean with the kayak, right? So some of the recommendations. First of all, you have to know your subordinates, okay? Once you know them, you can exploit their potential. Help their development, something which has been mentioned already by Pavel here, okay? Build a positive climate in your organization, something I already mentioned. Let them do it themselves. Sometimes you think you can do the work better, but you should let them do it themselves, even if it's just good enough, okay? It also pays off. But again, if you have to be a bad cop, and that sometimes happens, you have to be the one, all right? And sometimes when you see that this organization kind of swings out of your hands, and it is bad what I'm saying right now, sometimes it's good to pick up a scapegoat and execute this bad cop action so everybody can see it, okay? Sometimes you really have to have guts, all right? All right. I'm kind of bringing a lot of dogs here, all right. The loyalty. Loyalty goes both ways. You should be loyal to your subordinates, and they should be loyal to you, all right? So basically, what I am saying is that you obey your boss, you identify with the goals of the organization, but you are loyal to your subordinates, okay? And then you are successful in leadership, because the truth of the leadership is not to make people do things, force people to do things, but to inspire people to do things, all right? So, what's the best way to show the loyalty to your subordinates? Something was already been mentioned here by my predecessor. If you promote their success, then they know you are loyal to them. If you take care about their careers, you take care about their development, is also a proof of your loyalty. I think the best example is that you have a very good guy in the organization, and many times I have seen that people are reluctant to get rid of such guys, so they are kind of blocking careers of the good guys because they want to keep the guy in the organization so he works for you. If you promote such guy, even if he goes outside of your organization, but he's promoted, I think that's the best proof that you are a good leader. You take care about your own men. Okay, so this is just a short visualization of what I have already said. So when we speak about the organizations, once again, you align yourself with the organization objectives. Looking up, you identify yourself with the objectives. You obey your boss. Looking down, you are loyal to your subordinates. Okay, loyalty is about sharing things. Loyalty means sharing. Loyalty means sharing success. But loyalty also means sharing the failure, right? So only by sharing the failure you show your subordinates that you're really loyal to them, okay? I think the worst case is that when the leader in the situation, when the organization fails to do something, blames his subordinates in front of his boss, right? Saying that, oh, we screwed this up because they did something wrong, right? Just putting the blame out of his back. This is probably the worst case scenario, right? So we as loyal leaders, we share success, but we also have to be able to share the defeats. Okay, we share burden. In the military, we do it by being with our men. And this is actual picture of my command vehicle with my crew. You know, we all look the same, but everybody knows when I am the boss. Okay, and I think this is the last pack of cigarettes which we have shared in this particular vehicle. Okay, so you be there with your men and women. You ask their opinions. You conduct the small talks, right? You explain objectives. You explain why we are here. You explain why we conduct this effort, and you explain where is the end of it and how do we proceed. You explain this. It is especially important with the multi-level organizations. And I can tell you, when I work right now as a chief of staff, as I told you, it's about 200 men and women organization. When I speak to my immediate subordinates, I'm almost sure that whatever I say will not go all the way down to all the levels to the single soldier. Okay, I'm almost sure. Okay, so what I do is that I meet every time, every quarter, I meet with everybody, with 200 people, and I talk about our objectives, just to make sure that they all understand. Okay, so you have to explain the objective. Now, number 8 is the manager versus the specialist. Okay, as a leader, you have to focus on your particular job, and this is the management, this is not the production, right? So I'm just trying to visualize on this slide that for a leader, my tool is Microsoft Outlook, right? Their tool is PowerPoint, Excel, whatever they produce, okay? To illustrate this situation more, I can tell you that within our command post right now, we use about 27 types of software to facilitate the command functions which we provide in the Special Forces. I can say I am familiar with maybe 4 or 5 of it, okay? I don't even know how they operate the rest, but I know perfectly how to utilize the contents to facilitate the function of our CP, right? So once again, you have to focus on the management, you have to focus on your product. Your product is the decision. It's not the paper, it's not the analysis. Your product is the decision. Okay, the cold mine. I'm saying that the cold mine is probably one of the key features of a good leader. When you execute this leadership function, you will be target of numerous people who will try to influence you. And you have to resist this influence, all right? Your product is the decision, and you have to make these decisions without being influenced by the others. If you cannot resist the influence of the other people in the organization, you very often become a tool for the manipulations, right? And you don't want this to happen when you are a leader. Finally, loneliness is the disease of the leaders. Okay? When you decide to have the leadership position, whether it's in the military, whether it's a corporate life, in finances or business, politics, whatever, you have to be sure that you accept being lonely. You will have no friends in the organization which you run. You will have no friends because very often you will have to make unpopular decisions based on the organization objectives, not on personal like or dislike. So, leadership is not the popularity contest, and you have to be aware of it. You will have to be able to make unpopular decisions. You will have to have the courage to take the decisions and to bear responsibility for them. In many instances, you will have to take the decision even though your subordinates would tell you something else, okay? And let me just give you one example. When we were deployed in Afghanistan, there was a time when we were practically cut off supplies because there was only one road there. Our supplies were brought by civilian contractors, and these civilian convoys have been taken over by the Taliban almost every time. Okay? At one point, we were able to see the attack on that convoy through one of our unmanned aerial vehicles. All right? So we were watching on the big picture this video from the aircraft showing the Taliban basically robbing our stuff from our trucks. All right? There were many soldiers watching it. everybody was very crazy. Everybody was like, you know, let's bomb these guys, all right? Let's bomb these guys right away, and we can do it right away. Now, I thought at that time, you know, there are many people living in the mountains, not necessarily a Taliban, all right? Maybe these are just regular people coming to these trucks after the attack, just getting water and the supplies which were left there, all right? So, I went out of the room. I spent probably 2 or 3 minutes there thinking about this myself, without all of these people influencing me with they shouting, let's kill them, right? And I came back to that room and I said, no, we don't do it. We follow these guys, but we don't bomb them, all right? The next day, it occurred that I was correct. These guys were just living in the mountains. They came just there for the supplies, all right? So once again, you are alone. You will have to take the decisions, even though there will be a very high pressure, a very high influence of the environment, and you have to have the courage to bear the responsibility for these decisions. Okay, this concludes my brief. And now I think you will have some discussions. I think I will open the discussion for all 3 speakers, right? So if there are any questions for even Pavel or Professor Zakaras, so the floor is yours.